Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have another book news video. These are always fun little videos that I do to cover pieces of news that generally don't get covered in the general book community. I usually try to focus exclusively on book news. This video, I do have one news item that is not necessarily book news, it's actually television news, but I wanted to cover it because I have a unique perspective that I'd like to add to it. But most of the news today is going to be covering book news. I have some news about Dune. I have some news about Star Wars: The High Republic. I have some news about Delilah Dawson in Star Wars, and I have some Star Trek news to discuss. So lots of juicy topics to get into. So I'll begin with my first topic of the day is the new Dune TV series that was just officially announced. It's called Dune: The Sisterhood, and it is going to be based off of the book The Sisterhood of Dune by Brian Herbert, the son of Frank Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. I think this is an interesting story because I remember back in 2019, Kevin Anderson came to my town in Columbus, Georgia, and basically did a little talk for a really small group of people. There were maybe 50 of us in the entire thing. It was really small. And he said that was the first time I had heard that he was going to be not only co-producing, or rather working as a consulting producer on the new Dune movie, which, you know, the 2021 Dune movie that was superb, one of my favorite movies ever. He also announced that he was working as a producer on a TV series, which he said at the time, I have no idea what they're even doing there. But he said they had asked him to serve as a producer on that series. And so now we officially find out information, and not only is it going to be a series that he's, really involved in, but it's adapting one of his books. I will just tip my hand and say I'm a huge Kevin Anderson fan. I've read a lot of his books. Nowhere near have I read a majority of his books. He's written so many books in his career. He's written like 170 novels. I've read maybe 25 of them. So he has an extensive career behind him. And in that whole career, he really has not, to my knowledge, had his novels adapted into movies. He has certainly worked in movies. He's done novelizations for movies. He has worked with film producers to make tie-in content. He has, had his information from his Star Wars stuff has made it into the TV shows, but he's never actually had one of his original novels turned into like a movie or TV show project. Not that I could know of. But if you know of one, let me know down below, but I don't believe there has been one. So this is a big step for him. That's pretty big news. And it's very exciting. It's also exciting to see them recognize the power of the Dune property. Before, it looked like we were just getting the Denis Villeneuve movies, and to me, there's so much in the Dune universe that can be explored, and as such a big Kevin Anderson fan, I want them to explore the Kevin books, even though I haven't read them all. I have several of them, but I will read them eventually, and I will definitely read them faster now that I know that this series is going to be about some of the Kevin books. So let me get into some of the information about the series before I move on. First, it's going to be including some actors like Emily Watson and Shirley Henderson. The only thing I recognize Emily Watson from is the movie War Horse, which I thought she was great in. I think she'll really fit a role as one of the Bene Gesserit characters. And here's a little blurb about the people involved in the production on the behind the scenes side. It says, Diane, and this is coming from Deadline. Diane Amu-John serves as creator, writer, co-showrunner, and executive producer. Allison Shapker, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, serves as co-showrunner and executive producer. Johan Reck will direct the premiere episode and executive produce. Denis Villeneuve, who directed, co-wrote, and produced the 2021 Dune film, is executive producing with John Spahidis, Scott Z. Burns, Matthew King, John Cameron, and Kate Collins, along with author Brian Herbert. Byron Merritt and Kim Herbert serve as executive producers for the Frank Herbert estate, and author Kevin J. Anderson serves as a co-producer. So they've got a great team behind them. Of course, Denis Villeneuve made the Dune movie, and so if he's producing this series, he probably won't have an intense amount of focus in it. He won't be able to put, he won't be directing episodes or writing episodes, but he'll be able to keep the aesthetic. He'll be able to bring the ideas that made Dune so great and bring them to the forefront and be able to say, you know what, that's just not going to work, or you know what, that's just not going to work. So I'm really excited to have him involved. I am curious whether they will do the entire trilogy of that. You have The Sisterhood of Dune is the first book, and then you have 2 sequel books. You have Mentats of Dune and Navigators of Dune. I actually have a copy of Navigators of Dune that I got as a free copy from something. So I haven't read the whole trilogy, but I have the 3rd book, which I'll read once I read the whole trilogy. So it is interesting that they've only announced the first book as the first season. I think they're waiting. I think they're doing the House of the Dragon treatment, where they want to wait. They're going to make the first season and then wait to make further announcements to see if the first season is successful enough to warrant more. And I hope it is successful enough, because it'd be great for Kevin, and it'd be great for the Dune franchise as a whole. So I think this is excellent news from the Dune franchise. So my second piece of announcement is we're now going firmly into book news. So no more television, firmly into book news. My second piece of book news has to do with Star Wars: The High Republic. The High Republic had just finished up Phase 1 at the beginning of 2022, and now, as I record this video, it is ramping up Phase 2, which takes place 150 years earlier. It is the first book, Path of Deceit, has already come out. Several other books are scheduled to come out within the next month, but there are some new books that were just announced at New York Comic Con at their big panels. So let's go through some of the list. One book that was announced, the first to release, was called Quest for Planet X. It is the middle grade novel coming out in April 2023. It is written by Tessa Gratton. Tessa Gratton just co-wrote Path of Deceit, which was the YA that just came out, and she's also written a lot of YA and adult novels in the fantasy realm. I think she's most known for Queens of Innislayer. So she's quite known in the fantasy genre. You also have the book Cataclysm coming out in April of 2023, written by Lydia Kang. And this one's really interesting. You see the cover here looks very similar to the cover of Convergence, which is coming out in this November. So they're keeping the themes of the covers between the middle grade consistent, the adult novels consistent, and the YA consistent within a phase. So I like that they're keeping them consistent within each phase. It means that we're able to understand, this one connects to this one, and this one connects to this one. It doesn't seem too jumbled. If they all had the exact same art style, which I would still enjoy, if they all had the same art style, I think it'd be more confusing for a lot of people. So Cataclysm comes April 2023. We also have Path of Vengeance in May 2023 by Cavan Scott. You can compare this cover with Path of Deceit, both called Path of. And also, Cavan Scott wrote one of the best High Republic books so far. He is an incredible writer. I'm always excited when he does more Star Wars. I wish he did more adult novels, because that's my jam. So you combine the great of Cavan Scott with the great genre adult Star Wars novels, and it'd be great. But he's still in YA, so I'll accept this. So I'm very excited for this one. I think this one will be a lot of fun. And then the last book that I'll talk about here, there was some comics news, which I don't cover comics, but the last book that I'll cover is the High Republic Anthology, the first High Republic Anthology, which, first of all, I'm very surprised it took this long, but second of all, I think this is a very smart move. But this isn't just a High Republic adult anthology a la the 40th anniversary anthology or the novella collection for The Last Jedi that they did. This is short stories in the High Republic for YA. This is going to be a YA book, so it's going to be very different. It's not going to be middle grade, from what I understand. It is a YA, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this releases. It's going to have just about all the Star Wars authors who have been involved in the High Republic thus far. We have Tessa Gratton, Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Lydia Kang, George Mann, Jenny Jose Older, Cavan Scott, and Charles Soule. So all the writers, if you take out the writers of the manga who that was a bit different story. All of the actual like prose writers are going to be involved in this. So I'm really excited to see how this anthology plays out. As with most anthologies, I'm sure that some of the short stories I will absolutely love and some of them I will probably not. But overall, I'm very excited. The High Republic is still firing on most of its cylinders. I think that it has a good thing going for it. So I'm very excited. There's just a few things I don't like about it, but overall, very excited for the High Republic. So my third piece of news is another Star Wars piece of news, and that is a new novel was announced that's not part of the High Republic or anything, so I decided to put it in a separate announcement, and that is Star Wars Inquisitor, The Rise of the Red Blade was announced at New York Comic Con at a different panel. This one's going to be written by Delilah S. Dawson. Woo! I'm a huge Delilah Dawson fan. I thought that her young adult novels, Strike and Hit, were brilliant novels. I thought that her Star Wars books are some of her best, and they're wonderful books. Phasma, brilliantly plotted book. And Black Spire, brilliantly plotted book. I've made this comment before. She's not my favorite Star Wars writer, but when it comes to plots, she is my favorite Star Wars plotter. And so her and Cameron Scott. Cameron Scott's really close to her, but I'd give her the edge on plots. So I really like Delilah Dawson's plots. So I'm very excited to see where this goes. This is a different type of book than she normally does. In the sense that this is not set in the post-Return of the Jedi. This is, in between episodes 3 and 4, in the most Star Wars fans' bread and butter space. It's got Inquisitors in it, so it'll be kind of familiar to a lot of people. It'll tie in to Rebels and Clone Wars and the comics and other projects, I'm sure. And that's a very striking cover, I have to say. I'm very excited. I'm glad they released the cover with it. But that cover looks great. And it's Delilah Dawson, so I'm sure I'm going to really love it. She did some short stories in some collections, and she wrote the best stories in some of the collections that she contributed to. So I really am looking forward to seeing more Star Wars adult books from her. The only thing that makes me sad is that this is not the third book in the Phasma Black Spire trilogy that we wanted. She's been pushing to get a third book with Vi Moradi, and I've been wanting a third book with Vi Moradi, and we just haven't had it. I believe, this is just my speculation, that the book sales on Black Spire were tremendously lower than the book sales of Phasma. And so I think that they just don't think that a third book would do good enough for them. I don't even think Black Spire hit the Times list. I really don't. So I think they just want to keep Delilah Dawson because they recognize her talent, but they don't want to keep going with that series. So I understand it, but I wish we could still, maybe she can fold Vi Moradi into some other type of story in the future. But I'm hoping that this book sells enough so that they feel that they can trust Delilah Dawson with more Star Wars content, because she's wonderful, and her Twitter is humorous. So the fourth and final piece of news that I have is something that apparently came out a month ago, but I totally missed it. And that is that Star Trek Prodigy will have 2 young reader books coming out in January of 2023. These are from Cassandra Rose Clark and Rob Perlman. This is a very interesting development to me because Star Trek has pretty much been an adult novel-centric focused. They've always had their Simon & Schuster pocketbooks, now gallery Star Trek novels. There have been a few YA adaptations. And of course you have those little kid books, the little golden books. There's always been those for Star Trek. But, it's mostly just been adult novels and then young adult adaptations. We have not really had middle grade or young reader novels that much. And so these are going to be the first 2 in the young reader collection. I looked it up, and they're set to be about 160 pages. So that's a decent. It's not just like a picture book. That's an actual, that's a little chapter book type size, and it's going to be only about $7 to purchase in paperback form, which is not a bad price at all. If they had done hardcover, maybe it'd been more expensive. So they're charging a pretty decent price point for them. And while I'd never really watched Prodigy, I've been mostly sticking with the adult series for Star Trek. I've heard good things about Prodigy, and I've heard good things about the people who worked on Prodigy. And I think this is a good idea for Star Trek to expand into new publications so that they can reach new audiences. If they can get this young reader audience now, maybe that young reader audience will turn into an adult reader audience, and they'll get more adult novels because they'll have expanded their audience. That's what I'm hoping. But this is kind of interesting because this reminds me a little bit of the Star Wars middle grade books from when I looked up about it, but it also reminds me of the Halo Battleborn books, which were similar in design and also were written by Cassandra Rose Clark and published by Simon & Schuster. So for one, this is Simon & Schuster using their own publishing house in different ways, but also using the same author to experiment with. That means they trust Cassandra Rose Clark. She wrote one Star Trek novel, Shadows Have Offended. That was an adult novel. It didn't do amazing sales from what I understand, but it got decent reviews, and they liked working with her apparently at Gallery Books. And of course, she's written those kind of young reader, or maybe middle grade Halo Battleborn books. So she has a connection there. So I'm just really excited to see Star Trek expanding more. I still don't understand the logic behind how few Star Trek novels there are. This is the most Star Trek adult content we've ever had, ever. And yet, this is the fewest Star Trek novels we've ever had. Why? Are they trying to make so few novels that they will guarantee that they'll hit the Times list, which they haven't. They haven't hit the Times list. So I just don't understand the logic. I feel like they're hurting the brand by not keeping up a breakneck pace. By slowing down and only doing a book every 3 or 4 months, they're just hurting themselves, I think. So I wish we got more in the adult space, but at least we're getting the young readers. Whether I will read this or not is still up for debate. I still have not made a final decision. I'll make one closer to January, but I am glad that these books are being published. And I might buy them just to support Star Trek novels because they need some help right now. Boy, do they need some help. So those are my 4 pieces of big news items. New Dune TV show based off Kevin J. Anderson's work. New High Republic novels in all the grade levels coming out. New Star Wars adult novel by Delilah Dawson. Woohoo! And also new Prodigy young reader novels. Which of these news items excites you the most? What are you most excited for among a specific book? Are any of these make you angry, or do you not like any of these? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every comment that I can. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.